we'll go over some of the possibilities concerning the source of the claim that mind control is real and being inflicted upon certain individuals, which we call the targeted individuals. It is not, it's this, or this. It can be combinations. There are some people that present as being under the influence of certain kinds of mind control, other people under different kinds of mind control. And unlike most of the talks you've heard today, even though I agree with almost everything I've heard, I'm not going to take the position that it's the government that's doing it. There are other possibilities. But it is also possible the government's doing it, because the government has this long history of experimentation on citizens without their permission and or control. I have over 1,000 emails in my computer actually I have over 30,000 emails in my computer, but 1,000 of these emails are from targeted individuals. Some of them are long and articulate, detailing specific effects they've experienced. Others are short and cryptic, cries for help and relief from the torture they're experiencing. Some seem to be the rantings of a human gone mad, either to start with or by being driven to madness by a mind control harassing signals. Is mind control possible? Absolutely. I'm only going to touch on just a few things. I gave more details during the psychotronics presentation, but there is a mountain, I mean a mountain of stuff. You've seen some of it here. I'm not going to repeat much of what you've heard here today, but there is a mountain of evidence, some of which is known by people here now that they've heard the presentations today, some of which you can read about in various publications, but some of which you've never heard before. Who would use it? We'll look at that. Why would anybody want to use it? A lot of people already have a mindset that, well, it must be the government and they're just a randomly selected guinea pig. That's one possibility. There are others. We'll talk about the targeted individuals, some of the things that happens to them, and possibilities, what's going on, and can there be anything done about what's going on. Over the years, reports have started to surface from people who claimed there were men in black with little black boxes zapping them, and eventually the claims became more generic, and the reports seemed to focus on a feeling that the zapping was some kind of experiment on randomly selected individuals. Government was suspected because of the past histories of human experimentation without informed consent. As the number of TIs increased, so did the number of claims from skeptics that they must be psychotic. My first inkling that there was such a cadre of people as TIs came in 1998 when I ran across the posting on a website which included the sentence, quote, "I would like to strap Eldon Byrd to a gurney and drip sodium pentothal into his veins so he would come clean about mind control." I responded and opened a dialogue because it dawned on me that my project for the U.S. Marine Corps to develop a non-lethal magnetic weapon was being construed as involvement in a mind control program, which it wasn't, although I later discovered that after the shutdown of the project, the technology did go dark, and I didn't go dark with it. So I may have been an unwitting accomplice in the development of the technology. We don't have to subscribe to conspiracy theories to see a mind control, going on under our very noses right now, and rather overtly. I hate to tell him that the technology does exist to influence emotions, which can then influence the DNA. And unfortunately, the technology also exists to control scalars and use them to influence biological functions at the quantum level. That's the new technology you may not have heard of yet. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Psychoactive signals have been observed and photographed on television sets inside people's homes in the United States. Interesting that when that photograph was sent to two places. It was sent to Dick Cheney's office under the previous Bush administration, and it was also sent to an aerospace corporation here in California. And the response from Cheney's office was, "Forget about this. It doesn't mean anything." From the aerospace company, it was, "Where'd you get this psychoactive signal?" How did they know? He invited me to give a presentation at a conference he was that he was the chairman of in Montreal. We're talking about early 1980s. At this conference was everybody I had ever met that I knew was doing research in anything that might be construed as mind control, that was doing it in an unclassified venue. It included Andy Bassett, the bone healing guy. It included Damadian. It included Polk. It included people, one guy even who had a lab. The only person in the whole Navy that I knew of was doing mind control research in a way, even though I didn't consider mine to be that at the time. This guy was. And when the government shut his project down, the Navy shut his project down, the same day they shut mine down, he killed himself. And I thought, man, you know, there's a million interesting things to do in life. You know, I am not my projects. I do not get married to the work I do. But he was. His life's work was his life. And when they shut down his life's work, he ended his life. Well, now I'm wondering if he really did. I don't know anymore, I guess. Today we know there are technologies that can induce sound into the brain at a distance, that can monitor and alter brain waves at a distance, that can alter behavior at a distance, that can induce images into the brain at a distance, that can target individual organs at a distance and disrupt calcium ions binding onto individual cell surfaces at a distance, creating pain and other effects anywhere in the body, and technologies that have moved beyond the realm of electromagnetics into the realm of hyperspace and scalars and into the quantum realm. We have demonstrated the ability of electric and magnetic fields to alter DNA and control bioelectric and biochemical processes in living systems. In other words, the technology to effect mind control exists without question. The question of whether it's being used is the cogent one. Reports from the open literature. One from NASA that says, the phenomena occurs at average power densities as low as microwatts per square centimeter with carrier frequencies between 0.4 to 3 gigahertz. By proper choice of pulse characteristics, intelligible speech can be created inside the brain. Do you know what operates also between 0.4 and 3 gigahertz? Your portable phone. Not your cell phone, your portable phone. Smack dab between those two exact frequencies. The 3 gigahertz one hasn't come out yet, but it's been developed. But 0.4 to 3 gigahertz is exactly where your portable phone works. That'll become important in a little while. How about this title? Gordon and Breach Publishing Company, abstract of a publication entitled Experimental Production, quote, or parentheses, false memories, by right hemispheric stimulation from complex, weak magnetic fields. Not images, memories. Author, Dr. Michael Persinger. April 24th, year 2000. It's been possible to send information directly into a person's brain via radio waves since before 1989. In 1980 and 1981, I was tasked by the U.S. Marine Corps to develop a non-lethal weapon using electromagnetic means. They were going to give this project to General Electric, but when I heard about it, I said, why do you want to do that? You know, I can do that. And they said, why can you do that? And I said, I'm the only medical engineer the Navy's got. And, you know, I've been looking into this kind of stuff. I think that's doable, and you don't have to give it outside. We can do it in-house. Well, I chose to concentrate on ELF nonlinear magnetics for several reasons. That was the easiest thing to do, for one thing. When the project was terminated by the sponsor, it had been demonstrated that such signals could alter the behavior of rats, cause histamine to dump into brain tissue, and we could entrain human brain waves at a distance. I'm of such a conviction that I would not allow that part of the project to be demonstrated, to be used on anybody else but myself. I was the guinea pig for the brainwave entrainment part of that. You don't feel anything, just that for a while your brainwaves are different.
So it worked?
Oh, it worked. And immediately after I showed that we could do these things, they stopped the project and made it go dark, apparently. Under contract to me was Drs. Elizabeth Rauscher, Dr. Ross Adey, Dr. Evan Harris Walker, and Michael Persinger. And in addition to what I just said, at the theoretical level, we showed that in imaginary time and space, in hyperspace, electromagnetics results in solitons, and that only quantum events can occur in small neurons in your brain. And that phase conjugate fields, which create scalars, can cause profound effects in living systems. At the time, I thought that the shutdown of the project was just stupid on the part of the government, but I enlisted the help of Senator Claiborne Pell, who, as a senator, could go and dig into classified projects and find out that, indeed, well, first he told me there was nothing there, and then a year later he called me into his Senate office building. He said, can't give you the details, but your project went dark. So I have pretty good authority that it really did go dark. One central part of the project was the evaluation by Ross Adey of the LIDA-4. The CIA had obtained the device through Canada along with a photo showing a whole room full of people asleep in an audience with the LIDA-4 machine sitting on the podium. It was touted and patented in the US as a medical device that emitted extremely low frequency magnetic fields, acoustic signals in the form of clicks, heat, and electric fields. It was constructed in the 1950s. While it was in Dr. Adey's lab at the VA hospital in Riverside, putting cats and rabbits into stupors, a tradesman passed by the lab, confronted Ross, asked him where he got that brainwashing machine. Ross explained it was a medical device from the USSR. The tradesman said that he and his buddies had been brainwashed by an identical device during the Korean War in a POW camp. While they were under the influence of the device, questions and answers were read to them. When the Red Cross arrived to check on them, they asked questions, and the prisoners blurted out answers to the questions and wondered where the answers came from. If a technology was developed in the 1950s that worked to put people asleep at a distance and had a hypnagogic effect on them, it is reasonable to assume that it was refined and the devices made smaller. Psychodiagnosed. The idea was to influence the President of the United States by impressing brainwaves into his head during an important decision to sway the decision in the KGB's favor. We settled on the technique of creating a scalar signal by phase conjugating two magnetic fields at right angles to each other. And you heard Brother Rhodes talk about that. One generator was placed in a van about a half a mile from the White House, and the other in an apartment about half a mile away. The field strengths necessary to create the desired effects were well within the realm of what had already been demonstrated, but the critics panned the novel, saying it was way too far out. I later suggested to Larry that a more practical way of doing the same thing would be to use the telephone. That was when telephones still had a magnetic pickup in the earpiece, and we could modulate that magnetic field and cause an effect. That book was published, nearly 20 years ago. John Mack, at the Prophets Conference in New York in June of 2001 this year, stated that many UFO abductees, contactees, claim to also be victims of mind control. Caroline McLeod constructed a study which showed that character structure and psychopathology have little to do with telling us about the nature and meaning of an alien encounter. And I would submit the same thing holds true for TIs. A TI from Michigan, whose tape you'll hear excerpts from later, was psychologically evaluated after he went to the police and said, somebody is harassing me electronically, and he played tapes for him, and they said, well, son, you need to go get psychologically evaluated. You're nuts. He took a written psychological test, passed it fine. No pathology was noted. The psychologist who interviewed him afterwards wrote a report and said, with the exception of this guy hearing voices in his head, he's perfectly normal. Actually, McLeod's study indicated that most UFO abductees were suffering from some sort of post-traumatic shock. Well, darn, if I'd been abducted by aliens, I'd be in shock too. And the situation arises, which is valid for TIs also, as to how poorly understood these people are and badly served by a psychology that's based on pathology and or psychodynamics. If TIs are to be helped, methods of understanding must be developed that can combine human experience with empirical study and relate them to communication at a subjective level. Also, the mental health field needs to transform from its position on pathology to an alternative that includes self-realization. At some point, the TI is going to say something to the effect, I don't know why I'm being a target, but regardless of what my friends and the culture says or thinks, these experiences are happening to me. They do not need external verification. When the TIs can reach this point, it helps them become grounded. They can feel that they know themselves well enough to say, what I know about myself tells me I'm having this experience, and that's good enough. However, the current worldview is based on scientific materialism. A literature search indicates that biomedical telemetry went dark in about 1985. Prior to this, it was a hot area of interest. I published a paper on the telemetry of brainwaves in a hospital environment in 1972 and was in demand as a speaker on the subject in about 1982, and suddenly, as if a switch was thrown, in 1982, from then to this very day, biomedical telemetry is not a subject. All interest in the field just seemed to abruptly stop about 1982. Okay, I have some tidbits of information to share before we hear the tape.
Can I do a correction?
A correction.
There was a paper about the telemetry published in 1986. It was out of Marquette University in Wisconsin, and I cited in the paper some of the papers I gave you.
1986. In 1982, the International Biotelemetry, the Biotelemetry or Biomedical Telemetry Conference was a book of papers this thick in 1982, and I don't think they ever had a conference again. Briefly, another question.
Are you aware of the football-sized field phased array radar antennas in low Earth orbit?
Yes. Yes, they're all over the place. They started in the Soviet Union. The Soviets invented the phased array radar, but we're not going to get into that. Just a few little miscellaneous tidbits. Secretary of Energy O'Leary has stated, and I think it's been mentioned here earlier, 500,000 Americans have been experimented on without their consent.
Just a DOE, or is that just from DOE experience?
I think he's just that's all he would be able to comment. Just the radiation experiments. Yeah, and he's admitted that some of these 500,000 people have committed suicide because of those experiments. Michael Persinger, who was recommended to me, and I put him under contract in my project, he was recommended to me by the CIA as somebody, you might want to talk to Michael Persinger, you know, he's really got onto something. He said, quote, entire populations can be influenced over TV and radio and telephones and the internet, inducing fear in people. And then they can be told that that fear they're feeling is coming from such and such a source, whether it is or not. And they'll glom right onto that. His contention is it's the right amygdala in the brain is the interface between external fields that can influence behavior to the point where people can have hallucinations. He says, I can make people hysterically blind. He says, I've got a signal shape. He says, I keep the frequency the same, I keep the intensity the same, I just change the shape of it a little bit. And people say, why'd you turn off the lights? You can make a person blind, and they're not really blind. You can make it so they can't hear with just these weak magnetic fields. NASA, they have reported enough that we know they have voice-to-skull technology, and they've given some of this to law enforcement agencies. Ron McCrae, who wrote Mind Wars, shortly after the book came out, he was put in prison for child molestation. The Bulgarians and the Japanese have written books on mind control. Martin Eben wrote a very poor book called Psychic Warfare. Alan Dulles, director of the CIA in April of 1953, said, quote, we're in a battle for the control of men's minds. Well, why was the director of the CIA saying that? In 1972, Helms left the CIA. Don't you dare go on the internet and try to look up anything about Helms. Because if you do, there will be a cookie put in your cookie list that says www.cia.gov. That's a fact. You want to try it? It's fun. You will get a cookie from the CIA if you want to know anything about Jesse Helms. Or Richard Helms, not Jesse Helms. Yeah, Jesse Helms is a different animal. Sorry, Jess. Yeah. I could go on and on and on about the woodpecker and stuff and Delgado, but time is slipping by here. I just came back in June from a conference called Electromed 2001. There was an Electromed 1999. There will be Electromed 2003 in San Antonio. This one was in Portsmouth, Virginia. These are academicians, PhD engineers, every one of them. Matter of factly talking about all these neat things they're doing in their lab. They're not talking to anybody else about it, as far as I know, except the Air Force was there. That was kind of interesting. I said, are you from the School of Aerospace Medicine? It's electromedicine conference. Makes sense if you're from the School of Aerospace Medicine. No, not from the School of Aerospace Medicine. What part of the Air Force are you from? Well, we're interested in this technology. So they're getting it. It has been demonstrated over and over again. There's no question about this. I mean, they even have the theory nailed down. They've proven the theory. They have electron microscope photographs of all this. They can now, with a high-frequency electric pulse, no more magnetic, that's gross stuff. I developed a theory about how you can influence the inside of a cell with a long, slow frequency, like 10 hertz or less, magnetic field. And it has to do with developing a soliton wave on the surface of the cell, and when that soliton wave, which is caused by this slowly changing external magnetic field, when that soliton wave bumps into a receptor sticking up out of the cell, it might be, if it's a pancreas cell, it might be looking for sugar. And if it bumps into that, it'll shock the receptor, and it'll put the same signal down inside the cells that says make insulin, as if there's sugar really there. And so we had a mechanism for influencing the function of even a cell. But that's pretty gross. This is what they can do now. They can take a high-frequency pulse, and they can zap a cell, and it causes the cell to open up a pore. Doesn't hurt the cell at all, it just opens up a hole in the cell. And if there are chemicals, depending on the frequency of this pulse, if there are chemicals in the external environment, the cell will suck them in. Think of it, 5,000 times more chemical inside a cell than you can just by taking a pill or having an injection. Electroporation. Electroporation. The first set of papers were about electroporation and how they can zap the cell with 2 pulses and keep the pore open longer and even increase this. And then there was a whole bunch of papers after that that said, that's old technology. We have nanopulses now, picopulses now, that the cell membrane is totally transparent to. We don't have to open up pores in the cell anymore. We can get in there and make the DNA replicate anything we want, any chemical that's capable of replicating. We can trigger that internally without opening up. You don't have to put a chemical in the cell anymore. And we can influence the actual migration of electrons on each one of the strands of the double helix of the DNA. And we can make the DNA do anything we want. We can go in there and alter the genes in the DNA to make them do anything we want. We can even let the DNA release the hydrogen bonding that holds the strands together, make them unwind, make them wind, make them form toroids. We can, in effect, do what you thought they couldn't do, Mr. Rust. Unfortunately, they can control things that go on inside cells at the quantum level. They can control the scalars. That is the scary news. He claims he can understand what they're saying. He hears things like, die. We're raping your mind. Why don't you just give up and die? You don't have any control. You're going to be among the victims. We're messing with your brain. I'm using, even though there's no children in the audience, I'm not using the exact words that he says he hears. There are some people that present themselves as if they're under attack by some kind of electromagnetic energy. It can be the electric field, either of the 2 components of the magnetic field, the A field, the magnetic vector potential, which we know is biologically very active. These are vector fields. Subtle energy fields like scalars, which I mentioned, and the spin-offs of that, which are subatomic at the quantum level. In your pocket, you're in an ellipse of a field that will interact with any incoming magnetic field and alter it. It'll change it. Now, but that's only one aspect. It only does magnetic fields. I've made a few that do scalar fields also, but I don't know how effective they are. All I know is that it puts out a scalar field too that's the same scalar field. In the scalar, it's the same as the magnetic field, but it's a scalar. There's various models of that. Some involve Tesla-type coils. Subtle energy, that's the bugaboo. That's why I was asked the question of Mr. Rhodes, and I was glad to hear that they have something they claim will do scalar fields, because that's really tough. And that's the new technology. And we don't know how to even, as far as I know, except for what he may have, even detect these suckers unless you're in a university with an electron interferometer, which are very expensive.